Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Consistently Good podcast. I am your host, Jeff Cunningham. Have you ever barely missed qualifying for the Boston Marathon? Maybe you missed that Olympic trials qualifier. Have you ever gotten injured and it just took a frustrating amount of time to heal? We've had massive tech innovation over the last many decades that have changed the course of running. We're faster now because of shoe technology. We don't have to guess about whether or not we're recovered. We don't have to guess about how far we ran. Today, I'm going to take you on the ride, going back in time where I am the evolving fossil that I am, telling you about the good old days and where we are now, where we're all joyful participants in what I believe is the greatest sport on earth. I would characterize almost all of the technological innovations over the last 30, 40 years as being a net positive. We could see the gains that people make, the number of people who are in the fitness industry, the number of people who are entering races, running races. We can look at the progression of world records. We can look at the progression of treatment and recovery protocols, and we can see all the positive developments that have come about through technological innovation. Here's a question that I get a lot from people, and it really, really makes a lot of sense, which is, why does it seem like every race course is long? Now, GPS watches are absolutely phenomenal, but what GPS watches do is they interface with obviously a satellite up in outer space, and then they measure your movement across the surface of the Earth. That's what they do, right? And so what they do is they measure the actual distance that you are traveling. Specifically, they measure the distance that the watch is traveling. And so when it says that you've run 1.0 miles or 1.0 kilometers, it's just measuring your movement, right? Well, what you need to understand is that will not necessarily be representative, and in fact, in almost 0% of the cases, will it be representative of exactly where a race course was measured, okay? How do they measure race courses? Well, there's something called a Jones counter, and it is typically used on a bicycle, okay? And the Jones counter has to be calibrated with a calibration course. Typically, these courses, according to World Athletics, need to be anywhere from 300 to 500 meters long. You use an actual calibration course. They actually measure these courses with a metal tape measure, and you put a piece of tape or a chalk line or a paint line at one end, and then a chalk line, a piece of tape, whatever, at the other end. And then you calibrate it by starting your wheel on that line and then riding the bicycle in a straight line to that other line to ensure that you've gone exactly 300 meters, 400 meters, 500 meters. Typically, like I said, these calibration courses, and really it's just 300 or 500 meters essentially in a straight line so that you can have it exactly calibrated almost to within a centimeter, couple of inches, okay? Once you do that, then it's calibrated, then you can go and you can measure a course. To get a course certified, you have to file an application to get it certified. And then in the United States, they'll send somebody who does measuring courses for USA Track and Field, and USATF certification then can occur by them having a calibrated Jones counter on a bicycle, and this person knows how, and they're trained on how to actually measure race courses. How are they measured? Race courses are measured when you go around a turn or you go around a corner. Race courses are actually measured 30 centimeters or 12 inches from the edge of the curb. So we're talking about this much, right? So you can imagine on a course that may have 10, 15, 20, 25 turns on it, right? Typical marathon course is going to have at least a couple dozen turns on it often, right? And you can imagine that if you measure within 12 inches every turn or on a curve, right? You measure it 12 inches from the edge. And if it's on a winding road, you measure it along the tangents, meaning the straightest line, right? That you can drop, that you can ride. You can imagine that that's going to be very, very different in almost 100% of the cases where you are out running the course in a race. So imagine this, the gun goes off, right? If anybody is running one of these huge races, like last year, like London Marathon course was incredibly crowded. Berlin Marathon, crowded. Boston Marathon course is renowned for being crowded because, the starting line up in Hopkinton is very, very narrow, right? That when you start, you're going to be weaving in and out of people. Well, when you're weaving like that and the course is measured straight, you're adding distance. And then when you swing around a turn, let's say you're running in a big pack of people, you might swing 5 meters. You might swing 10 meters wide all the way around the turn in an arc. You might be actually running an extra 10, 12 meters per turn, maybe an extra 5, but multiply that by 20, okay? 20 times 10 meters, that's 200 meters. And so that's going to be an extra 40 seconds, 50 seconds. If you're running 8-minute pace, 3:29 marathon speed, 200 meters is going to be a full minute that gets added to your marathon, okay? But here's the deal. Your Garmin is going to say that you ran, okay, in that case, if it's 200 meters, about an extra 1/10 of a mile. And so you're going to look at your Garmin and it's going to say, well, I ran 26.3, right? Or I ran 42.4 kilometers, 42.3 kilometers, whatever it is. And the answer is, yes, you did run that far, okay? But that's not where the course was measured. If it's a USA track and field certified course in the United States, that course is accurate. And in fact, the funny thing is, each course is mandated to be measured 1/1000th, okay, of a percent longer, right, than you actually need to run. And let me go ahead and explain what it is I'm saying. If you run a 10,000 meter course, that course is going to be measured 10 meters long. So that course will be measured at 10,010. A marathon is 42,200 meters long, approximately 42,195, if we're actually being hyper-technical. So the Boston Marathon, the Berlin Marathon, California International Marathon are all measured 42 meters long. Every course to be certified has that factor that they add in to ensure that the course is never short, okay? Why is this? Because we want to be able to ensure that if somebody runs a national record, if somebody runs a world record, if somebody runs a race record, that it is going to be able to be ratified. So rest assured that the course isn't long. It's actually measured a little bit long, but the course isn't as long as you would believe. I remember looking at Des Linden's Garmin data after Boston Marathon, I want to say 2-3 years ago. And I remember she shared her Garmin data because it was pretty cool to see Des's splits. And I think it came out to 26.42 or 26.43 miles at the Boston Marathon was my recollection. Nowhere in her Instagram post did Des say, man, they measured the course along this year, because it wasn't long, right? It's just impossible to run perfect tangents. Now, every once in a while, you'll see a race where they'll actually have a tangent line. A lot of times you'll see like a blue line. I think Berlin, I think Chicago has had tangent line in the past. A lot of races will actually have tangent lines, which is pretty cool because what they'll do is they'll put the tangent line as the closest approximation of where the course was actually measured so that if you run directly on that line, and even then that's generally an impossibility because you're running in packs, you have to weave, you have to go to the side of the road to grab a cup of water, and then you see, your favorite aunt or your uncle or a loved one or a friend up the street. And so you weave over there to go and high five them, give them a hug, and, in the middle of the 15th mile and then get back on the course. You're going to add distance. But if you run right on a tangent line, right, you're going to end up running the course distance. Over-reliance on Garmin can lead you to believe that, one, you're running faster than you are, and two, it's going to end up making you believe that you're running farther than the actual course was actually measured. I have had an instance. It was at the Jersey City Marathon 2 years ago where I had a guy who was trying to break 3 hours in the marathon. He did not use the mile markers on the side of the street. He relied solely on his Garmin, and it was splitting each mile. Generally speaking, it's pretty close. It's going to be within 2 to 4 seconds a mile. It's going to be pretty accurate. But here was the problem. He was in his own world, so to speak. He was dialed in. He was concentrating. So he was using his Garmin. And so he got to 26 miles and he thought to himself, I've got 0.2 of a mile to go. It's going to take me about maybe 90 to 100 seconds to cover, maybe a little longer than that, maybe a little over 100 seconds to cover the last 0.2 of a mile. Here's the problem. He actually had 0.3 or 0.35 or maybe even 0.4 of a mile left, right? And so when he got to 26.2, his watch actually was sub 3. But the problem is he still had running to go. He missed breaking 3 hours by, I want to say 20, maybe 30 seconds. And he called me and he said, I felt fine. I had juice left. I was very, very meticulous in my pacing. And then when I realized what was happening, I sprinted like mad. And I was actually able to mine his Garmin data. This guy was running literally 6 flat mile speed, even under 6 flat pace for, it looks like, the better part of the last mile, the last half mile, didn't make up the time. So over-reliance on your Garmin on a race course is one of the aspects that I would recommend against, okay? What is great about the Garmin? Guys, we can go out in a new city, a new town, a new race course, and we can simply start the watch and take off running and know mostly accurately how far we've run. Turn on your Garmin, you take off running, and you're going to know pretty precisely how far you've gone. In fact, that actually raises an interesting question. I want to go and run from my old dorm, Penland Hall, right there on 5th Street, Baylor University, and I want to run down along University Parks Drive through the Low Trail. I want to run to the MCC baseball field and back, and I want to see if it's as far as we thought it was. I have no idea. Actually, I'm too old and lazy to do that. I'm going to put a Garmin on somebody else and have them do it. How about that? What do we have? We have the ability to have a lot of stored data. Okay, I had, well, to this day, I still have a Timex Ironman triathlon watch. Now, I'm going to argue that it's the greatest timepiece in the history of humanity, the Timex Ironman triathlon watch. And boy, I tell you what, it was amazing because at first, you would just have an analog stopwatch with start, stop, reset. That's literally the only function that stopwatches had. And then they came up with this incredible thing where you could punch a button and it would save 8 whole splits. And you could go back and toggle through and look at your 8 splits. And then they came out with a watch that had 30 splits on it. You could save 30 laps. And I'm like, holy crap, that means I can run a full marathon and I can still have 4 splits left that I could save on my watch. This is amazing. This is like the greatest technological innovation ever. Boy, thought we were living, Now, I mean, that's a joke, obviously. I mean, that's a joke, right? I love the watch and I still use it. I was out there yesterday at the track, timing some repeats and on my Timex Ironman watch. But the reality is you have Garmin, you have Coros, you have GPS watches. We have Strava, right? What are the benefits of that? Well, I think it's pretty obvious, right? We know how far we've gone. We have lots of stored data. We are able to go back and look at trends. We can look at on this course, last week, last month, last year, this is what I ran. You can go back, and unless I actually hand wrote down data and I had a written training log, I don't know where it is. I looked for it years ago. And I don't know what happened to it. I think my parents, through various moves when I was in college, may have lost my training logs, but I had literally every step written down from when I started running in like 1984 all the way until I graduated from high school in 1993. So 9 years of running was memorialized in this log. Now, nobody has to do that. Right? Almost nobody does do that because it's all stored electronically. So it's just been really, really groundbreaking and just a complete game changer, obviously. What I really appreciate, about GPS watches and then wearables like Whoop is that it does provide you some insight into how productive your sleep was, right? How productive your recovery is. It gives you some not so accurate data, such as what your current max VO2 is. I think that we love the good news and we love the confirmation bias if it tells us that our predicted marathon time is what we want it to be. But if it is way off or slower than what it predicts our marathon time to be, then we go, this thing isn't accurate. This is dumb. Frankly, that's kind of the camp I'm in. Listen, man, I mean, you're running in heat, you're running in cold, you're running in altitude, you're running in hypoxic environments, you're running on hilly courses, you're running on flat courses. If you're running in the Netherlands, in Western Europe, you're, a meter or two below sea level, actually, in literally, I think 80% of the country. It's so, when it starts trying to give you this data, trying to give you this feedback based on predicting race times, where it looks at your repeat sessions, maybe your tempo runs, let's say how much volume you're running. It's wildly inaccurate. So I wouldn't put too much into that. What are some positives? And I'm going to go ahead and credit Josh Holly with this one. I was actually just talking to him a few minutes ago before I came in here. And he said, what I really, really appreciate about things like Strava and like the wearables is the data that it gives you, but sometimes it's the affirmation. And then like Strava, people can go on there and comment, good job, awesome job. And there's an accountability factor where people love to log their runs on Strava, okay? Love to log their runs electronically, even using Instagram, right? Where we sort of update people on the daily goings on in our lives. And as athletes, we like to document our runs, right? Listen, if we are moving our bodies, that's a good thing. And we don't need to spend time being the gatekeepers of, okay, well, you don't need to be logging everything on Strava. I will tell you this, don't be emotionally dependent on it to the degree that we panic or we have some incredible sense of loss. Is every once in a while we can't log a run or we can't publicly sort of give people the details or the goings on of our training because we're not going to be able to do that every day. So don't be completely emotionally dependent on it. But largely, it's a net good being able to involve the community in our training journey, in our running journey. And I love it. And then, of course, you get the biofeedback, okay? You get like how rested you are, whether or not you had productive sleep, whether your heart rate is chronically high. You may be able to tell or have some insight that you might be iron deficient, that you might have some issues metabolically that are causing you to have high heart rate. You might have a low level simmering viral infection where you have slightly elevated heart rate. And so knowing that our heart rate is chronically high, if we're using either an arm strap, sometimes a chest strap we would use like during exercise, but even then with a wearable at our wrist, it can provide some data that I think is really, really useful. Be careful with heart rate, okay? Be careful with heart rate because it's not really accurate on your wristwatch. And I think that we can all agree that it's not super accurate, right? If you want to get accurate heart rate info from your wrist, I'll be honest with you, just take 2 fingers, put it here, measure your heart rate for 15 seconds, multiply by 4, and you're going to be able to get your heart rate. I do have to laugh though, because I remember when I was a kid, I would run a repeat, and then when I was training for summer track, junior Olympics, things like that, and my dad would actually stop me after I would finish a repeat, and he would actually stand there, take my heart rate really, really quickly between reps, and he would keep track of it that way during my recoveries. Of course, now, we don't have to do that because we can have arm strap, chest strap, and we're going to be able to mine that data and take a look at it often after we get done running, and we can go, wow, my heart rate was up around 170, 175 running those 800 meter reps, right? When looking at heart rate, okay, one of the things that we have to be careful, though, is that we use heart rate as a guide, not our governor. And I understand that the Maffetone method is really, really useful. And heart rate provides us so much meaningful data about the state of our health, about the state of our recovery, about how hard we're running in the moment, about whether or not we're overrunning a workout, whether or not we're underrunning a workout. It can tell us a ton. But don't be so reliant on it that we have ceded our quintessentially human ability to feel. What do I mean? Guys, I have had people who have asked me, well, what is easy? And I'll write down 10 miles easy, 5 miles easy on their training plan. And they'll say, well, what pace is that? And my response is, well, it's not a pace, and it's not even really necessarily a heart rate. It's a feeling. And I was joking with somebody the other day, only in America could we complicate easy. Because easy is literally the opposite of complicated, right? But when we think about it, it's not always as intuitive as one may believe. And I have to remind myself, especially when somebody might be relatively new to the running space, or we're trying to undo the hardwiring of the past, undo the endemic gray zone running that seems to pervade all the little nooks and crannies of the running world. Let's go ahead and call it like it is. I think high-level high school running and collegiate running, whether it's junior college, whether it's four-year universities, gray zone training is sort of the training zone du jour, so to speak. It's every run is done sort of in what we might refer to as zone 3, right? Every easy run turns into sort of this quasi low-level training run that might be something that's at akin to our aerobic threshold, which would be about marathon pace. That's too fast. And so the problem is when we never checked heart rate and when we never were even conscious of it, when I was coming up in the running world, we would just go and sometimes we would just gray zone our runs and nobody was ever monitoring heart rate. We went completely subjectively on field, but we would lie to ourselves. We would gaslight ourselves into believing that we were running easy when we really weren't. Heart rate is great because we can generally use it as a guide to where it'll give us some insight as to whether or not we're overrunning our easy runs, okay? When I say easy, what I mean is you should be able to be conversational. Maybe not chatting with the verbosity that I'm talking with right now, but maybe kind of close. I mean, I'll sit there and I kind of love it because, we go out there, it'll be 6 o'clock in the morning. It's dark. Everybody's super sleepy and sort of dragging themselves out of their cars. And I'll say, okay, everybody go warm up. And then 15, 20 minutes later, I'll hear a pack of 10, 12, 15 runners coming back from their warm up. And I hear, you can hear them coming way up the street, just chattering, laughing about how evil coach is and how he's just actually a rotten human for making us have to run a 7-mile tempo run at 6:30 in the morning when it's 80 degrees, right? But you can hear them chattering. That means they're running easy. We don't need to look at heart rate data to know that. We don't need to measure the respirations to know that, because anybody who's going on and on and on about what an evil human coach is, all the way up the street where I can hear them, they can't be running hard and carrying on like that. But it's not always that simple, right? You're out by yourself. Most people go on runs, typically by themselves. And sometimes we sort of get in our head and we just want to hurry up and get this done. I've got, to finish this project for my boss that he dumped on my desk and, at the end of the workday. And then I gotta get home to, kiss my spouse and put my kids to bed. And I've got all this stuff. Let me hurry up and get this over with. I don't want to check the box at this pace. I should check it. I want to check that box fast. Get it over with. Look at your heart rate. Heart rate should be zone 2. I always tell people, hey man, if you're in the 130s, low 140s for your heart rate, you're probably okay. And so you can use a heart rate monitor like that. Here's what's interesting though. Just like gray hair, when we get wrinkles, some people have blonde hair, some people have brown hair, some people have freckles, some people don't. We're all different humans genetically. So we don't all have exactly the same heart rate. I was just talking to one of my elite marathoners the other day, and I think their resting heart rate is in the low 30s, actually, right? My resting heart rate, typically around 56, okay? Maximum heart rates can actually differ as well. And so we use heart rate as a guide, not our governor. I had a lady in Columbus, Ohio, and she told me, I'm running easy every day. Why do I not feel like it's easy? Well, you can look at things like levels of cortisol. Are you going through a tough time in life? Are you iron deficient? Are you not sleeping? I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why running that should otherwise feel easy doesn't feel easy. But she said, my heart rate monitor says I'm running easy. That's not what your heart rate monitor says. Think about what I'm saying. Your heart rate monitor gives you your heart rate. Your heart rate monitor doesn't say, congratulations, Huckleberry. Congratulations, Blueberry. You're running easy. No, Huckleberry's heart rate might be 140. But consider the fact that 140 might be closer to zone 3 than he realizes, right? Might be closer to zone 3 than Blueberry realizes, but she is going off of what standard definition of easy is as it relates to heart rate. I had this lady go out and she actually turned on, she wore her GPS watch, okay? And I said, absolutely do not look at your heart rate at all on this run. You go out and you run your 7-mile course at a pace that's empirically easy, and don't look at your heart rate and let your heart rate govern your pace, meaning I'm at 140, this means this pace is easy. So she finished the run and she goes, man, that run felt so good. And I said, Okay, what does your data say? Her heart rate was 125, right? So what we found out was she needed to be running between like 120 to 125 into the high 120s on heart rate. And if she was even in the mid 130s or 140, even though most people would say that's easy, and she kept saying, my heart rate monitor says I'm running easy. No, your heart rate monitor said that your heart rate was 140, 145, but it didn't feel easy. Just slow down, right? Remember, it's a guide. It cannot ever be your governor. And also think of it this way too. When you're out there and you're running, especially if you're on a course that you know is 6 miles or a course you know is 8 miles, what is it that we do really, really well with as human beings? Relaxing external stimuli. Okay? This is not relaxing. That's not relaxing. That's not relaxing. You know what relaxing is? Wow. I'm running in New England. I'm in New Hampshire right now, and wow, the fall foliage is just absolutely gorgeous in October, right? Oh my gosh, I'm running through the middle of Kentucky. Look at that horse farm over there. Look at the beautiful grass, right? Get calm. Don't spend all of your time with your measurables to the point where you're actually circumventing one of the great things about being outside and being a distance runner, which is the neurologic decompression, the peace that can flow over us just running through God's creation, looking at the trees, the birds, the scenery, and just run easy, okay? So be careful with your GPS watches, great tools. Be careful with your measurables, great tools. Always let them be a guide. If your Whoop says that you slept great, or your Garmin is telling you that you're rested or you're recovered, but you don't feel recovered. Remember, it's quintessentially human. One of our greatest abilities is to feel. We feel things that are wet. We feel things that are dry. We feel things that are hot. We feel things that are cold. Set your hand on a hot stove. You don't stand there and wait for some technological innovation to tell you that that stove is hot. You feel it. You feel it, right? So always remember, use your wearables, use your heart rate monitors, use your Whoop, GPS, watch, use it to provide you with the meaningful data that it is good at, but don't cede your ability to feel, whether it's hot, cold, up, going down, fast, slow, tired, not tired. Don't completely simply go to the gadgetry to tell you about you. Your body tells you about you really well. I always tell everybody this. We're all born with the ability to be at the very least bilingual. We're going to speak the language that's spoken in our households, typically, and we're able to understand the language that our body speaks to us. When your body says, I hurt, when your body says, I'm tired, wearables can help, but you're going to know. Okay, guys, let me pause for just a second. Foundational to your success, whether it's in a workout or whether it's in a race, is good old-fashioned hydration. And it's not just water. We need electrolytes. BPN Electrolytes fits the bill. With 500 milligrams of sodium per serving, whether you're using your individual Go packs or you're using a scoop of the powder out of the canister, you're going to be able to fuel your workouts and fuel your races in a way that's going to allow you to maximize your performance. Go to bpnsubs.com, pick up your electrolytes today, whether it's salted watermelon, strawberry, lemon lime, mango, we have a flavor for you. No high fructose corn syrup, super GI friendly, easy to get down, easy to keep down. It's going to help you perform at your best day in and day out. Shoe technology. Man, what a difference 10 years makes. right? Uh, Carbon plated racers specifically did not exist in 2015. There were some prototypes that people started wearing who were professional runners. There were prototypes that elite athletes started wearing maybe late 2015 into 2016. Okay. Carbon plated shoes have been the single greatest technologic innovation that has changed the face of running and racing from every distance, from the long sprints all the way up to the marathon, even ultra marathons. I'll never forget 2016. 2016, the U.S. Olympic Trials Marathon was held in Los Angeles. And in that race, Des Linden, I believe Amy Craig, and Shalane Flanagan took the top 3 spots in the women's marathon. I believe it was Craig and I believe it was Flanagan were wearing the Nike 4% carbon plated prototypes in that race. Nike had gotten those to those ladies, and they both made the U.S. Olympic team 2016 heading into the Rio Olympic Games. 4th place was one of the great runners in U.S. history, okay, Kara Goucher. Kara Goucher wore Skechers, right? And I was reading a fascinating article from Forbes magazine where they actually talked about that race and they interviewed Kara. Kara had the best coaches in the world. At the time, Mark Wetmore and Heather Burrows were coaching Kara going into the 2016 Olympic trials, okay? She obviously has a medal from Global Games running other distance, and she had a personal best, I believe, of 226, 225, 226, I believe. I could be lying, but I think in that range. And in retrospect, looking back on the race, months, maybe years later, Kara said, I thought maybe it was because I didn't have my best day. It's pretty hard to argue when you're 4th in the Olympic trials. You had a pretty good day, right? But here's somebody who was used to performing on a world stage, this is somebody who was one of the great runners in U.S. history. And she says, I'm dogged by the reality that the 2 ladies that finished in front of me, who she has an immense amount of respect for, no doubt, ran in Nike carbon-plated racers. And Kara, like 99% of the rest of the marathoners on the planet at the time, ran in a non-carbon-plated shoe. Listen, Skechers made some really, really good racing shoes back then. I mean, let's not forget the fact that Bob Keflezighi, right, won the Boston Marathon in a pair of Skechers, right, the year after the Boston bombing, okay? But not carbon plated for Goucher that day, and she finished 4th, and she was a minute or 2 behind 3rd place that day. And if you look at the data, they were called 4%, but I think that might be a little bit of a stretch. I don't think that you would necessarily get 4%. But there's been some studies done with large cohorts of runners comparing their times on certain courses and against other runners and their times on other courses. And whoever did the study controlled for all the controllables. I can't remember the exact specifics of it, but here was the basic conclusion, which is, yeah, these carbon-plated shoes are making people faster, and probably to the tune of 2 to 2.5%. Okay, well, if you run a 2:30 marathon like Kara did that day, and you take 2.5% of that, right? That is 250 seconds, 250 minutes, 2.5% of that, okay, is more than the margin that she was behind 3rd place that day, right? So is it fair to say that 3-4 minutes can be taken off your time by simply running in a carbon-plated shoe rather than not? The answer empirically and unequivocally is yes. Okay. Now, in the early stages of carbon plated shoes, there were the naysayers out there who said, those don't help. I don't need those. And there were some conscientious objectors, right, for a long, long time. I mean, it lasted for years and years. She said, I am not. And there were some, sort of snide remarks. The Nike Vaporfly, of course, I think is a shoe that everybody is familiar with. I had some sort of staunch old, crotchety buddies in the running community that called them cheater flies. Was it cheating, really? Is it cheating? No, it's not. It's called innovation, man. Okay? Think about this. Remember when everybody used wooden tennis rackets? Remember that? I checked and I looked. 1983, okay, Yannick Noah won the French Open with a wooden tennis racket. That is the last major. Wimbledon, Australian Open, US Open, French Open. That is the last major. 1983, Yannick Noah, French Open. That's the last major that anybody won with a wooden racket. Now, Bjorn Borg was maybe one of the greatest tennis players of a generation coming up the 1970s, okay? And then into the early 80s, Bjorn Borg was hands down one of the three best players in the world. Bjorn Borg tried to make a comeback, okay? Bjorn Borg said, I don't need a graphite tennis racket. I'm going to use a wooden tennis racket that allowed me to rise to the number one ranking in the world as a tennis player. Okay? Bjorn Borg lost every single match in his comeback. And I'm here to tell you that it wasn't just because he was older, and it wasn't just because his skills had eroded. He was using antiquated technology. Why would you go and use a wooden baseball bat when everybody else in Little League and everybody else in high school is using a aluminum Easton? You wouldn't. It doesn't make any sense. And so carbon-plated racers work. Carbon-plated racers have changed the face of running. In 2020, the U.S. Olympic trial standard to qualify for the race for the women was 2:45, and now it's 2:37, right? The qualifying standard back in 2020, I think, was 2:19, right? Now it's 2:16 flat. It's come down 3 minutes. Listen, coaches have gotten better. Diet has gotten better. Strength training has gotten better. In the matter of 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, we've suddenly gotten so much faster that everybody is 4, 5, 6 minutes faster, like everybody across the board. No, because they don't all have the same coach. Everybody isn't all eating the same thing, but almost across the board, all times have come down. Look at the Boston Marathon qualifying times, guys. I mean, it's coming within the next few years where if you're a man who's under the age of 30, you are probably going to have to run under 250 to even be able to get into the Boston Marathon. That's astonishing, okay? Carbon-plated shoes are what have made the difference, okay? And so when you look at what women are doing and you look at what men are doing in the marathon right now, it's absolutely incredible. I remember looking back, and it was either 20, I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was 2004, 2008, maybe 2012 Olympic cycle. I remember listening to a podcast, and they were talking about the number of U.S. men who had run 2:19 or better in the marathon, and it was like 25. That blows my mind, because we probably, I don't know how many it is, but I mean, we're talking about that is in the hundreds now. That's in the hundreds. And quite frankly, shoot technology has had a lot to do with it, okay? But we don't have to apologize for that. Nobody's pole vaulting with a bamboo pole. Everybody's using a fiberglass pole now. That's the reason, right, why Mondo Duplantis is pole vaulting, it seems like a world record every other week now, okay? And that's the reason why before him, Sergei Bubka was vaulting over 20 feet from the Ukraine, right? Nobody's out vaulting with a bamboo pole. You would just completely get left in the dust. And that's okay, right? So looking at treatment, recovery, rehabilitation protocols, we've come so far as well, okay? AlterG treadmills, those didn't exist years ago. AlterG treadmills didn't exist 30 years ago, right? What's an AlterG treadmill? Treadmill where they can put you in a harness, offload your weight, and you can come back to training if you're coming off of an injury or if your legs are really, really beat up. You can get your heart rate up without the axial load, meaning the vertical load, right, on your legs that would come with running on full body weight. Really, really helpful tool. A lot of you are familiar with stress reactions, stress fractures, whether it's in your feet, tibia, fibula, your sacrum, your femur. These are the places, unfortunately, where a lot of people suffer bone stress injuries from training. Well, we now know that vertical stress applied in modest amounts to a healing bone can stimulate bone growth and can accelerate the healing process. Well, what's wonderful about having things like an AlterG treadmill, right? And there's other treadmills now that offer similar technology that offload your weight, is you can come back 20%, 30%, 70%. You can set whatever percentage of your body weight you want. It'll offload it, and you can get some stimulation of bone growth by some moderately applied stress without your full body weight coming down on a, maybe a 5-week-old or a 6-week-old stress fracture, in your tibia, for instance, right? So this is great technology. They're used at almost every university in the country that has, a fairly robust athletic department, physical therapy clinics, labs. They're all over the place. Now, obviously, cost is impediment there. You're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars for one or two of these treadmills. And so you're not going to go out there and be able to spend, $2,000 and get yourself one of these. But if you have access to them, and a lot of people do in various ways, use them with the guidance of maybe your physical therapist or your orthopedist or whoever is guiding your recovery. Use it. This is a great development, because the theory used to be just complete non-weight bearing exercise. And unfortunately, the only form of non-weight bearing exercise that we really ever used was pool. Well, what happens if you don't have access to a pool? Or what happens if you just don't want to be in the pool and you want to start doing actual physiologic mimicking of actual running? Well, you don't have to mimic it. You simply do go run on an AlterG treadmill. And so it's really, really wonderful. Shockwave therapy. This is a relatively new one, and it's really, really been a game changer for so many people. Shockwave therapy is somewhat akin to the old school treatments that you used to get in the high school training room and the college training room, right? It's ultrasound. Ultrasound actually uses sound waves to just moderately heat up relatively superficial tissues to heat up the actual tissue and stimulate blood flow. Shockwave uses acoustic sound waves that's more specific and pinpointed and can actually go deeper into the tissue. Shockwave therapy is typically done at some chiropractic clinics, physical therapy clinics. And you have to be careful, though, because there's differences in the shockwave therapy machines, okay? And you have to check to ensure that there was an investment, and they're not super inexpensive, but there was an investment in the quality technology with a shockwave machine that actually works well. If you go to a therapist and you go to a chiropractor or whomever is using shockwave therapy, it can be super beneficial for plantar fasciitis. I've had runners use it for Achilles tendonitis, and it's really, really helpful. It accelerates the healing process. It is great for maintenance of some chronic, crackly Achilles tendons and maybe slow to heal areas that don't necessarily have a ton of vascularization. It helps stimulate blood flow, and we know that typically stimulating blood flow can really, really aid and abet the healing process in a way that obviously can be a game changer for people who are desperate to either get back in the game or stay in the game, right? Dry needling is pretty fantastic, man. And I would really encourage people, if you have a slow to heal injury, or you have what I would refer to as a door ding, go in there and go get some dry needling done. And if you're needle phobic like me, maybe bring a blindfold. I don't know, but it really works. And they can even attach electrodes up to it and shoot, some electrical impulse into you in some cases, I believe. But dry needling is really, really fantastic. Altitude tents. These are interesting. Some people swear by them. Some people don't. Some people say, yeah, they really help. Other people say, not so much. But there's a lot of people that sleep in altitude tents in the weeks and the months, sometimes prior to big races, prior to running maybe ultras, right? Like, for instance, you go to Leadville, I think you're up at 12,000 feet, right? Going through Hope's Pass, you better have some hope in that race, right? But being able to sleep in an altitude tent can acclimate you to the altitude, or sleeping in an altitude tent can raise your blood plasma levels by simulating training or simulating sleeping in a area of the world that's at altitude. Artificially induced hypoxia. That is what we're doing here. You're sleeping in a hypoxic environment, so you might be, in beautiful Bee Cave, Texas, right, at 350, 400 feet of altitude, right, sleeping in an altitude tent. And so you might be able to crank that thing down to where you're sleeping in air that is akin to the air in Flagstaff at 6,000 feet or 7,000 feet, right? And so there's a lot of people that use this. Some people swear by it. Some people don't. But artificially induced hypoxia can help with some nominal increases in blood plasma volume. And of course, we know that can then stimulate red blood cell production, which could then make us be able to perform at a higher level aerobically by us being able to run farther and faster without going lactic, because we have high red blood cell count, which then is going to allow for a maximum delivery of oxygen to working muscles. And so that's why people would sleep in an altitude tent. You kidding me? 30, 40 years ago, that didn't exist, right? Saunas. Saunas used to be reserved for old men who would sit and talk about football down at the gym, and they're pouring water over the rocks and just sitting in there talking, right? And that's like, I got to sweat it out. Well, we now have the ability to go and spend, $1,500, right? You can get a little sauna, plug it into the wall in your garage. It literally took me to put my sauna, infrared sauna together. I think it took me, they delivered it maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I was able to put my infrared sauna together. We have it plugged in right there in my garage. You can go out there, sit in it for 15 to 20 minutes after a workout. What do saunas do? Well, used to, we thought that you would sit in a sauna, right, to sweat the toxins out. And listen, that may still be the case, and that could be a use that if some people wanted to sit in a sauna and just sweat the toxins out and just feel good, no, absolutely continue to do that. But here's what we know. We know that sitting in a sauna after a hard workout or sitting in a sauna after a run can actually increase your blood plasma volume as well. We know that training in the heat raises heart stroke volume and blood plasma volume, right? We know that training at altitude has similar physiologic changes on our bodies. Well, if you sit in a sauna, the evidence now is really, really good that it can help in small amounts. I mean, it's not some vast uptick, but it can help with blood plasma volume, which then is going to be able to help increase your red blood cell count, okay, which then is going to help you run faster and farther and deliver oxygenated blood to working muscles, right? So at the end of the day, it's really exciting. I think when we look at the changed landscape, used to, it was wear the lightest shoe you could possibly put on your feet, minimalistic, maybe a blown EVA midsole, and you basically were just wearing moccasins, and we thought that was the path to running fast. Now we have shoes with a big pile, right? We call it stack height, all right? And carbon plates running through them. And we now know that it's not necessarily just the weight of the shoe, it's the technology in the shoe that can help us run faster. Used to, we would have a sore muscle or a strain, you would use ice and hope. Now we have shockwave therapy, we have dry needling, right? Used to, you would go out and you would run 20 minutes out, you would run 20 minutes back. It was about 40 minutes. You would call it 6 miles. Now you have your Garmin and it's going to keep you mostly honest. Used to, you would be really, really tired and you didn't really know if you were sick or if you were fighting something off. Now we have wearables that can tell us, hey, your heart rate has been chronically elevated for a long time. Maybe you're fighting off a virus. Maybe you have high levels of cortisol. Maybe you're super fatigued. So all this stuff has changed the world of running. And when you look at the record books, people running 2:01 in the marathon, right? High schoolers just habitually running under 4 minutes in the mile when it was a short list of people that started with Jim Ryan and Marty LaCory and didn't make it much past that, literally until we got to the year 2000 and past that. We see the changes and it's coming in all the different areas. The last thing that I don't want to neglect is the advent of nutrition and how it's changed everything. And yes, I'm on a BPN podcast. And yes, I'm going to plug BPN's products because I believe in them. But nutrition globally has completely changed. Okay? When I was running marathons, there was one type of gel, okay? And you would take one and you might take two during a race. We didn't fundamentally understand the technology and the innovation and the need that we had for proper nutrition, okay? We have clustered dextrin carbs now in drinks, high bioavailability that we can take during exercise and before. Clustered dextrin carbohydrate was not in the sports drinks that I drank in 1988 when I was running in the Junior Olympics in Wichita, Kansas. It didn't exist. Gels? Are you kidding me, man? I mean, you're looking at these gels now and there's a proliferation of them. There's so many manufacturers of them, but we now know how the body absorbs carbohydrates. We know how the body uses the carbohydrates for energy. We now understand sodium loss that's incorporated hopefully into your gels. 110 milligrams of sodium in a BPN Go gel. I know that, right? And we now understand all these things so much better. I mean, when I look back and I look at how woefully fueled I was, how terrible my equipment was, how inaccurate all my training courses were, how a simple groin strain kept me out, and an IT band problem kept me out of an entire collegiate track season, that would never happen now because of all of the innovation, because of all of the changes that we've made, and we are all better off for it. So I want you to go out there and celebrate with your Garmin. I want you to go out there and celebrate in your next race with your fancy schmancy pair of carbon-plated racers. I want you to celebrate that when you do get a little banged up, you know exactly which physical therapy office to go to where you can get some dry needling done, get a little shockwave therapy done, a little manual therapy done. I'll go out there and I want you to be your best selves. And more importantly, I want you to go be good, and especially be consistently good.